one. Playback, please. Press bar marked visual playback. Appropriate replies. Watching. 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 Watching.
Hey guys, welcome back to Living in the New Renaissance. I'm Darren, and today I'm actually interviewing somebody as a follow-up to podcast number 6. Getting a little bit, little choppy, but I think if I don't move too much, we should be okay. Podcast number 6, if you didn't see it, was a podcast with Dr. Carly Howitt, and she's with the New Horizons program. We had discussed the idea of an uncrewed space flight, which my wife goes and tells me, well, uncrewed to me says it's refined as opposed to crude, which is very basic. And I'm going, no, it's crude as in people. And she's like, yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. And it's like, yeah, okay. But, anyway, that all being said, we spoke about uncrewed spaceflight in New Horizons and the Ralph program and where the probe is going in the future. And she very kindly put me in contact with another fellow. This guy is Dan Durda, and Dan is with SWRI, and he's a, well, I'll let him actually explain everything he does, but Dan and I are going to be talking about crewed, as in C-R-E-W-E-D, spaceflight, putting people on ships and sending them off into orbit type idea. So, hey Dan, thanks for being so patient. We initially kind of geeked out a little bit, and that was awesome. But yeah, I'm just wondering if you can tell me a little bit about yourself, like who you are, what you do as a SWRI specialist, and what does SWRI stand for as an acronym?
Yeah, you bet. Hey, Darren, great to be here. Thanks for having me on. I love talking about all this stuff. It's I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this. Yeah, I'm Dan Durda. I'm a planetary scientist at the Southwest Research Institute, SWRI, here in Boulder, Colorado. Actually, the company itself is a research and development company based in San Antonio, Texas. We have a Boulder, Colorado branch office that's fairly large, has maybe, I don't know, something like 100 PhDs here, engineers. We do primarily, space research, space exploration stuff. We're the home institution for the New Horizons mission, as you talked with Carly about last time. But we're also involved in a lot of other space missions as well. We have folks here who do, the magnetic field of the Earth and binary stars, and a lot of folks that are interested in planetary science. So, the atmosphere of Venus and volcanoes on Io. And my specialty is in asteroids. I got my PhD trying to figure out where some of the dust in the solar system comes from. Some of it comes from comets. We see that in the tails of comets all the time. But we also see the signs, the evidence that asteroids have bashed together in the past out there in the main asteroid belt. And that got me interested in thinking about collisions between asteroids and impact physics and impact cratering. So that got me into the violent world of impact experiments and going out and using big hypervelocity gas guns to fire BBs into rock samples at 5 kilometers a second and set off big explosions in the desert to look at the resulting craters and things like that. So that's the kind of fun I get to have. And that kind of got me into, thinking about what it's going to be like when we actually go to one of these little asteroids and start exploring it. First with our robotic spacecraft, as we're doing right now with the OSIRIS-REx mission at Bennu and the Hayabusa 2 mission at Ryugu. What's it going to be like when we as people get to go there? That's always been a really fascinating subject for me.
Yeah, I totally get it. And actually, it made me think about something as well that you must be totally geeking about the possibility of what's going to happen in the future with Phobos and Deimos in orbit around Mars.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people are already talking about missions to Phobos as kind of a staging post, a precursor, a stepping stone to Mars itself, right? Because, going to Mars, one of the difficulties is actually getting down to the surface. Mars has got this weird atmosphere that's, just thick enough that you have to deal with it, but it's so thin that you can't really use it effectively for, or very effectively for aerobraking and parachutes and things for very, very heavy stuff. And so it turns out it's a really difficult problem getting to figure out how to land on Mars, especially when you start talking about, a many, many, many tons spacecraft with a human crew on board. So some people are thinking, well, maybe we could, go to Phobos first, which is a much easier thing to deal with, and kind of get used to the idea of having people out that far, almost like an Apollo 8 of a Mars mission sort of thing, right? You go there without actually landing on the surface first.
Yeah, it's actually that was something I was thinking about as well. It would be a highly practical idea. If you went and I was hoping to talk to Robert Bigelow from Bigelow Aerospace about this idea too, but if you go and people that aren't familiar with the idea, if you go and you have a moon or an asteroid that's basically floating above the surface of a planet, and you dock a ship at it, you could potentially build a little habitat or basically create the equivalent of a space station and use that as a means to go and have your missions land on Mars from there. But if you also have your moon being mined at the same time, you can build crew quarters and everything else inside the moon, which is something I think would be a highly practical idea. I'm hoping to talk to Robert Bigelow about the idea too, because I've mentioned this to Carly previously, but I see there's three people that I really honestly see as kind of a triumvirate of future space flight, and Dr. Alan Stern was one of them, because he and teams like Dr. Alan Stern's, where we actually have the map makers that go and explore and create the maps that people will follow, and somebody like SpaceX and Elon Musk, Blue Origins as well, and also Boeing, people that are actually building the ships to get us there, and then Bigelow Aerospace and people like that who will actually create kind of the initial log cabins, more or less, for us to live in. Yeah. The initial reconnaissance, the infrastructure to get us there, and then what do you do once you get there? Exactly, it's a great three-part story. You bet. Exactly. But the thing I mentioned as well, most people probably aren't aware of this, but you have, hang on, let me grab this because this is good. You have, again, the idea, Mars has two moons that we're aware of. It probably has smaller moons as well. But you have Phobos and Deimos, and one of the moons is smaller than the other. And the other thing that's kind of interesting about it is that because of the way that they're going, one of the moons is actually in the process of leaving Martian orbit over a significant period of time, and the other one is going to be crashing into the surface. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I thought you'd be kind of geeking out a little bit about when you were looking at that idea too. Yeah, this is one of those weird coincidences in solar system architecture, if you will, that we're living at a time, very coincidentally, where we're like right, after 4.5 billion years of solar system history, we're right in that last, few hundreds of thousands, a few millions of years of one of the lifetimes of one of the moons there in the solar system. It's like, that's kind of a weird, coincidence in a way. It's you're there at a very special time. Now, obviously that means that there's lots of things going on, and you're going to be there. There's always going to be some special time sometime in the solar system, but that's kind of a weird one. I think the weirdest one is this amazing coincidence that, again, we're at a magic moment in time in solar system history where the apparent size of our moon, as viewed from the surface of the Earth, is almost exactly the same apparent size as the disk of the sun. And we get these magic, wonderful total solar eclipses. And it's the only place in the solar system where you can be on the surface or the gaseous surface of a planet and see a almost perfectly matched solar eclipse like that. There's no place else you can do that, and that's miraculous. And we're at the one time as the moon is changing its distance from the Earth as tides cause everything to align. This is the one time in solar system history where that magic coincidence is going on. So it's like go out and enjoy every solar eclipse you can, because it really is a miracle. Exactly. And also for those who'd be watching this who aren't aware of it, the moon that we actually have is unique in the solar system in the fact that it's 27% the size of the Earth. And we have the largest moon in our solar system that we're currently aware of by scale. Nothing else compares. It's like, I think the biggest other than that is maybe 7%. And
there's the whole Pluto-Charon pair, right? That's yeah.
And then we have
you can define, if you wanted to define that as a double planet in a sense, the difference there is with the Earth-Moon system, the barycenter, the center of mass of the Earth and Moon is just inside the surface of the Earth, whereas with Pluto and Charon, it really is outside the surface of Pluto. And so those two really do orbit each other rather than kind of more thinking about the Moon orbiting the Earth. It's a little bit of an interesting distinction there.
Yeah, totally. So I'm totally geeking out here, I should.
Too many fun things to talk about.
Oh yeah, totally. Because like we could totally go down all kinds of rabbit holes with this one. Because this is a personal passion of mine as well, ever since I was a kid, and that'll actually launch into my next question because I can go and do this as well. For me, the thing that actually goes and ties in with space sciences was when I was a kid. And people are probably going to be really sick of hearing this one already, but when I was a kid, I was about maybe grade 6, and I had a fantastic science teacher. And one thing that he was talking about that I noticed when I was younger than that was that we always had the same face on the moon, and I could never figure out why, because we had the shadows and stuff that would go around it. And then he explained to me the process of tidal locking, which, you know, the moon is rotating just fast enough that we always see the same moon as it goes around, or the same face as we go around. And for me, the click was, I saw that, he explained that, and that all of a sudden got me interested in, like, this is something I've seen myself, and that got me into seeing things like, okay, so what else exists in the solar system? We got like 33 million miles from Mercury to the sun, and we got 67 to Venus to the sun, and 93 to Earth, and it's at 147, etc. So my question is, like, for me, that was a watershed moment. Did you have one of those as well that put you on the path that you're on?
I guess it's hard to pick one. I'm very bad at these pick your favorite things, because I always think about 2 or 3 things. It depends on the mood I'm in and so on. But you know, I grew up always very interested in all things science, so I can't put my finger on a thing that got me into science. An event. I mean, it was watching every nature and science documentary I could on TV when I was little. Back when I was little, Jacques Cousteau was on TV a lot. For a long time, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I guess if there was one watershed thing that really gelled it for me and put me on this path now, it was when Carl Sagan's Cosmos premiered in 1980.
Oh yeah.
Up until that point, it was all science stuff. I mean, I was interested in anything science, but Cosmos gelled in my mind the idea that I could do all of the things in science that I like by being an astronomer, by being, by doing planetary science. And so I think that was probably the event that, in 10th grade, I'm going to get a PhD in astronomy, and that's what I'm going to do. So I guess that was it. It was Carl Sagan's Cosmos. That was the big thing.
Yeah, it's something I never actually got to see that much because we didn't have PBS when we were growing up. We had the old rabbit ears and
right.
Well.
And of course, then when you join the field and you're in the field and you go to your science conferences and meetings, and I was at just about the right age that I was, very fortunate enough to actually get to meet Carl at the meetings and get to chat with him. And I remember my PhD advisor at the time had worked with Carl when he used to be at Cornell, so he knew Carl very well and he knew the influence. So he made sure to pull me in at that one meeting and just pull me over directly and introduce me to Carl. I had lugged I knew that was going to happen, so I had lugged my copy of the bound, the hard copy of the book Cosmos with me, handed it to Carl to sign, and I was kind of grinned sheepishly, a little embarrassed. I said, the binding was broken, all the pages were falling off, the cover was tattered, because it's been, read and looked at so many times, right? I kind of handed it to him like that, and he just laughed. He said, "That's the way I like to see them." So it was great. It was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a huge compliment to an author too, because you see that actually the book is loved as opposed to just sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, I totally get that. But I was just sitting there thinking about one of the people that I actually got to meet. That was a personal favorite of mine was James Doohan.
Absolutely.
Working with a fan convention out in Vancouver, and one of the things that we were told was you got to keep Scotch away from him. You have to keep William Gibson out of the punch bowl. And the only way that Nichelle Nichols will get on stage is if she's had a couple, just to loosen her up a little bit. So that was an eye opener, actually, working at the convention.
It's fun getting to meet all these folks. Meeting Keir DeLay. I've met all of the Apollo guys, and it's you realize this really fortunate, amazing, lucky position you're in to get to, kind of, even in a minor way, befriend some of these folks at conferences where you're giving talks together and things like that. And you get to spend that little bit of magic time with these people that you've admired all your life, and to realize that, you can chat with them and talk with them about stuff that is in common. And it's a special privilege. It's a real amazing thing to get to have that chance. Especially when you get to see them as real people, as opposed to, this absolutely. That's the thing. I always try to be conscious of that when I meet these folks. It's like, I don't want to I love the show and talk about the character. It's like, they're not the character. They're a real person with their own things. And I really try hard. It's like, put that aside and just look, they're people, and talk to them like people. Exactly. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. So one of the things that I found kind of neat was you were telling me that you're going to be working working with both Blue Origins and with Virgin Galactic. Now, for those who aren't aware, you basically got, I'm going to use these things again as well, you got the equivalent of two entirely different setups. With Virgin Galactic, you have, I'm using my old phone here again, you basically have a lifting body like the shuttle, but with Blue Origins, you have a capsule sort of based system. And one of the things I was curious about with that is there a control difference between flying in a capsule as opposed to flying in a lifting body? Oh, well, sure, absolutely, and especially, let's step back just a second here. So again, I'm in this incredibly lucky position as a researcher at this particular institution, at Southwest Research Institute, that we have recognized that these same commercial suborbital vehicles that are, were initially at least primarily developed for the commercial space flight, sort of space tourism sort of idea. We pretty rapidly recognize that, look, this same, often to space, relatively comparatively cheap to space capability offers us as space scientists the same chance to get to our field, out to the field, to do our research in the same way that a marine geologist will go into Alvin and go down to the bottom of the ocean and go and explore a deep sea vent, right? I can get to the microgravity environment myself. I can get to the environment above the atmosphere where I want to put my sensors to look out to the universe without the atmosphere in the way myself. And so this offers us a chance to do some really, really neat research. And so our company has been forward thinking enough to say, well, look, okay, yes, let's get out there in front and help, develop this and let's see what we can do with these vehicles. And so we have a program here with three of us, Alan Stern in the lead. So there you go, back to Alan being on the forefront of all these good things. Of a group of three of us fortunate enough to go and get to go fly these vehicles and fly the payloads that we've been developing. And that's going to be coming up. And we are going to be flying with Virgin Galactic. We're talking with Blue Origin about flying with them as well. And from our perspective as the researchers, we're going to be, kind of passengers along the way in these vehicles, doing not only our microgravity and our observing experiments, we ourselves in some way are going to be payloads as well, because we've been encouraging our colleagues to say, look, every time you fly, you're a potential test subject. You're a body of data, literally, for our human physiology colleagues who want to better understand how the human body is reacting to this flight environment in microgravity. How rapidly do you start to adapt to microgravity? Everybody who flies is a data point. And so we're going to wire ourselves up to help provide some of that. So from our perspective as passengers, there's not going to be a whole lot of difference flying either vehicle, because we're just along for the ride, so to speak. and we're there to do our job. But absolutely, from the perspective of the way the vehicle behaves and so on, it's going to be a whole different environment. I mean, when we fly with Virgin Galactic, we're going to be slung below the carrier aircraft as it spirals up to 50,000 feet before we get dropped off. That's going to be a much longer flight. That's going to take an hour to do just that part of the flight before we drop off and get launched up X-15 style up to 300,000 feet or so to experience microgravity and all that. So that's going to be a longer flight for one thing. Quite frankly, the boost phase on this will be about the same as stepping over now to the Blue Origin vehicle, New Shepard, which is literally, it's a capsule on a rocket. It's the it's the Alan Shepard special. I mean, they call it the New Shepard for a reason. It's very much like the first suborbital flights that the U.S. did with Alan Shepard in the lead. Launch up to 100 kilometers. The total flight is going to be maybe 15, 20 minutes. 3 or 4 minutes of microgravity over the top as you're flying ballistic over the atmosphere. Kind of Mach 3 on the way up, Mach 3.5 on the way down. Maybe 3 Gs on the way up. Spiking up very, very softly. I've flown the profile in the centrifuge, and it's actually very gentle, but spiking up to about 6 Gs on the way down. But it's 6 Gs, laying on your back. It's 6 Gs in this dimension, not this way, right? When you're flying a jet fighter, like when I'm pulling Gs in an F-104 and F-18 or something, you're pulling those 5 or 6 Gs down this way, and that's pulling all the blood wants to pull the blood from your head down to your toes, and that's why people pass out. When you're pulling the Gs in this direction, though, when you're laying flat, it's much, much, much easier to take. And I'll tell you, practically anybody can do that. I mean, it's going to take the most egregious medical issues that people would have to maybe make that not such a great idea for them to try. But I'll bet I could take 100 people off the street, and 99 of them would be just fine with doing those flights.
And the thing that's kind of I find neat right now is, I'm old enough to have actually seen Walter Cronkite on television, and at the same time as well, it's such an unprecedented era in spaceflight, because you have what used to only happen with government institutions, where you had basically this giant rocket that was being launched into space, and you have this little tiny capsule that goes into orbit. That's what used to be a government agency sort of set up. And these days, it's actually private organizations that are doing it. And it's just so phenomenal to me, because you get, instead of one group or maybe 3 groups at the most, you can have 4 different companies inside.
You can have everybody. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a very transformative process in a way that we can't yet predict. When everybody gets to go fly, you're going to have the whole breadth, the whole spectrum of human experience and perspectives to relate back to this, having gone and experienced this, and coming back and talking about it and relating to people. And I think that's going to be an absolutely wonderful thing. You're going to hear and you're going to have new perspectives on human experience and the world we live on, and relating to people back and forth in a way that we've never had before. Everybody who flies in space is transformed by it. And as you said, so far that piece of the spectrum of humanity has been relatively limited. I mean, astronauts are people like everybody else, but I mean, it's true. I mean, we're selecting from a rather elite sort of group of humanity, and when everybody gets to go fly, you're going to have a lot more of that perspective coming back. And I think that's going to be so helpful. I think it's going to really affect the way people talk to each other, and that's going to be a good thing.
And when you're talking about transformative, that's absolutely it too. Because if you think about just the history of our own society, we had when we had people coming to America, you initially had the pioneers that were getting on those ships knowing that they might not come back. And you'd have a couple of those, and then it became more commonplace. And then you had the equivalent of the U-Haul type of experience, where you had just ships coming over and dropping people off. And spaceflight, I'm positive, is going to be the same way. You start off with the initial pioneers who are going up there expecting to be exploded in midair until it becomes commonplace. And then you have the shuttles sort of set up, and then you have everybody going up.
Well, to continue your analogy, we're going from the sailing ships of Columbus to, we're entering the end era of luxury cruise ships, right? In that sense, where anybody can take a vacation and go and experience the ocean and sail across to far off lands. And that's the analogy.
Exactly. Okay. I should ask the next question too. Yeah, because I think we're like,
we're fiddling around with a whole bunch of things here that are probably answering a lot of stuff that we were going to chat about. So that's fine. That's great.
Yeah, totally. So I'm going to ask the next one here, which was, what's the hardest thing about working in your field as a person, and what sort of things make you want to pitch it in?
As in not do it anymore?
As in not do it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, just very bluntly, I guess the thing that makes it difficult day to day is just raising the money to do what we do. I don't work in academia. I mean, it's academic like the private company that we work for, but it's not like a state funded or even a private funded faculty position, a tenured faculty position. I have to raise all the money for what I do for myself. I have to write a lot of grant proposals to NASA, the National Science Foundation, National Geographic, you name it. And it's tough. It's competitive. It's hard. There's a lot of really bright people out there competing for a pretty limited pool of funding to do what we do. And that's tough. It's a challenge. I mean, in some ways it's kind of fun because it really focuses you and it makes you think about what you're doing and why you want to do it. And you get kind of, excited about it. But when you write a proposal and the proposal review comes back and people don't really like it, it's a bit of an ego kick, it's like, yeah. So if I had to point to one thing, I would think that would be it, is the challenge and the difficulty of continuously chasing the funds to do what we do. That said, you can't complain about that too much because I'm really privileged. We're all really privileged to get to work in an environment like that where we get to be kids, right? And do this joyous, innocent, amazing, fun, lovely exploration of the world around us and get paid to do it. And remember that we're getting paid to do it out of the public coffers, right? So, it's easy and fashionable and fun sometimes to complain and moan about how difficult that is. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a great privilege to get to do that. So hard to complain too much.
And in addition to that, most people don't even see the benefits, the practical benefits that we get from spaceflight. I mean, one of the first things as a kid that I learned about space that was a practical thing is I used to drink Tang, and that was developed for the space program. And the first, maybe not the first pens that would write in any sort of setup, that was Parker actually that made those, from what I understand. The whole idea was you had so many developments that came back from spaceflight that have gone into standard society that we don't even see them anymore.
Yeah. Oh, it's so much. I mean, there's been so many studies and so many examples of all those tangible, real world technological advances that have come, and those are all, well, most of them are true. I mean, there's a few little stories out there about things like Velcro, and it's like, well, yeah, but that wasn't really from the space program. But it's the spirit of it, though, and it's exactly the correct idea that there's been a lot of, we spend so much money on space. I've never seen a dollar bill floating around empty out there in the solar system. All that money is spent here on the Earth, right? It's spent here to make our lives better here on Earth, and it makes our lives better here on Earth. There's all that the direct tangible things, but I like to also remind people always about the intangibles, the raising of the human spirit, of learning more. We are so privileged to live in a society, and specifically in a country that is, in a nation that's rich enough. And I don't mean rich by money, although that's certainly part of it, but rich enough in spirit that we go and we do this and we learn and we're curious and we share our results. And we're fascinated with learning more about the world around us. And that's going to echo through history. And that's what's important.
And that was what I always thought was so brilliant about Elon Musk launching Starman in his Tesla.
It touched the human spirit. It was like, you know what? You can launch a space probe. You can do something fancy and scientific, but you launch that car with that astronaut suit sitting in there, and people just got it. It's like, oh yeah. And yeah, it's the spirit. I mean, there's the technical things, the tangible benefits, but for me, I'm an artist too, and I have that side of me that just always, that romantic view of things, and that's, when it touches the human spirit like that, as you saw it did, that tells you something.
Absolutely. I was watching that going, oh, that's so fantastic. because I do the same thing. I'm a hobbyist working with art and stuff as well. I was modding a game for years and years, and that got me quite interested in doing Star Trek stuff, or doing textures and not a super professional, but I can get by with a graphics program. So, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to skip one of the, no, I'm going to ask this one because this is kind of important. So what do you think, what have you been the most proud of with what SWRI has accomplished, and what's upcoming for SWRI?
Oh, cool. Yeah, absolutely. Well, gosh, do I point to a specific thing or just a generic thing? I'm just so proud that, well, there's a couple things. I'm proud of what we do. I'm proud of what our company does. They're so far-reaching and so broad in scope and so imaginative. It's not just space this company does. I mean, it's all kinds of R&D. The founding vision of Tom Slick, the oil man who started the company, was, I mean, this is a guy who made his fortune in the oil industry and saw the value in research and in development and in exploring, and that spirit is carried through the institute the whole time. So I'm just really happy and proud to work for a company that values that and enables that, and much more specifically at the ground level. I'm just so happy and proud and fortunate to work in an office of a whole bunch of great people. It's just a big family of people who all share that same passion. And it's just a great, fun group of people to work with. Some places you get this sort of inter-office bickering and, well, Bob got his new desk, that means I can't get mine. We don't have any of that here. It's just it's a great group of people, and I love coming to work every day and hanging out with them. It's great. So that's what I'm proud of here. What's next? What's next for our office are more cool things like New Horizons. New Horizons is in some ways seems to be wrapping up its mission. It's still going to be going on for many, many years, doing a lot of exploration out there. But in sort of the what's most visible in the public view is that phenomenal flyby of the Pluto Charon system back in summer of 2015. Now New Year's 2019, we just had that amazing team effort flying by Ultima Thule and getting to see this pristine building block of the icy bodies in the outer solar system. What's coming next is we've got a whole bunch of other missions in the pipeline being developed and built as we speak here to go out and continue that exploration. Looking at the Trojan asteroids out there, out near Jupiter. We've got people working on spacecraft to go and explore in detail the atmosphere of the sun. We've got people on missions to just about every planet in the solar system you can think of, and every destination you can think of. So there's a lot coming. It's a fun place, that's for sure.
Totally. Carly and I had actually spoken briefly about Lucy. And
yeah, Lucy specifically. That's where I was going. I was good. I'm glad that was mentioned specifically. Lucy is in the process of getting ready to be built, and that's going to be a fantastic mission exploring several Trojan asteroids and getting a look at these things that'll kind of tell us a little bit more about the building blocks of the solar system, where we ourselves came from.
And one of the things I'm actually hoping to see in my lifetime again is I'd love to see probes back out to, it's always a trick how to pronounce this word, Uranus and
yeah, Uranus and Neptune, and that's the proper historical pronunciation. I know people like to have fun with that particular name of that planet, but historically, it's how it was pronounced.
Exactly, and I'd love to see probes around there because literally most people aren't aware that when Voyager went out, or the Voyager probes went out there, they just
shot right by. Yeah, it was a preliminary reconnaissance, and it was an absolutely fantastic preliminary reconnaissance. That's what you have to do. But then what those do, it's like the Apollo missions. What that does, it's not the be-all and end-all. It's only the beginning. It opens up all of the new questions to ask. And, Voyager did that for the outer solar system. I mentioned Apollo. People, we've been to the moon. You don't go back there. It's just going back and doing more of the same. It's like, it is so much different than that. Apollo only told us all the fun stuff to start to ask. There is so much still to do at the moon.
Exactly. I'd actually put it closer to being Mercury, to be honest, because Mercury was putting one guy up into and he dies.
Yeah.
And that's totally where I saw Voyager as being, was it's just like, we're just whizzing.
Just the beginning. Just the beginning. Yep. There's so much. That's the beauty of what we do. There's never an end to it. Every time you poke at a new place, it doesn't matter whether you've been there before or not. Every time you poke, you uncover another layer of the onion to start asking new questions about. That's the nature of science and exploration and discovery, is it never ends. And that's the joy of it. There's always something new to learn and explore and excite the human imagination about.
Exactly. Because when you take a look at Uranus and Neptune, you have the anomaly of, you have one that has a tilt, and then you have one that has a tilt. And why does it have a tilt?
Yeah.
When everything else has a tilt,
Yep.
That's what I would love to see more.
Yep. Well, learn about their interiors. I mean, they're different types of planets than the other two big gas giants, Jupiter and Saturn. They behave differently. Their atmospheres look different. Their magnetic fields are different. We think we understand from the theoretical computational models that their origin was slightly different, the way they grew to their current sizes and accreted initially. And going there and actually orbiting around them will help, uncover, teach us a little bit more about that process. So in the same way that discovering all this, to me, I got in, part of what got me in the field, what excited me from cosmos was this concept of planets around other stars and life on those other planets around other stars. That was obviously the key root, guiding passion that Carl had, that of course wore off on me. And for me today, even though I don't work in this field, it's what got me in, and that subspecialty in the field, it's what got me in the field overall, was extrasolar planets. And we have learned so much more about our own solar system in context now, by having discovered so many planets around other stars, to see the architectures, to see what's possible. It puts our solar system in context and helps us go back to the drawing board and better understand how we got to where we are.
Definitely. And I keep looking at the model that's behind you, and we initially discussed it before in the section where we're going to be cutting it out. But when I looked at what was behind you, I initially thought it was a model of a generational ship. Right.
Yeah. Which would be, we're going to do that someday. I mean, we're in the process now. We've been to the moon. We've dipped that toe into the waters washing up on the beach of the cosmic ocean, but we've got a long way to wade in still. And at some point we're going to venture off to a near-Earth asteroid while we're practicing to go to Mars, and that's not going to be the end of it either. I mean, I want to see us, get out there. I mean, there's going to be, eventually there are going to be humans traveling out there to the moons of Saturn and, and beyond. And, someday there are going to be those generational ships. I think our human species is going to, I guess by that time we'll probably evolve to not quite be humans anymore. I'm sure we'll be some sort of cybernetic, constructs that are half machine and half biological, and it's going to change by the time we're out there literally traveling, between the stars and off to other worlds that way. But if things continue to go well, I think we're going to be doing that. And that's, if I had pixie dust and could spread it around and sprinkle some on myself to get to go do something like that, you bet I would love to go and see what some of those worlds around other planets or around other stars look like. I want to stand on that moon of a ringed gas giant planet around some other world and look up in the sky and, Avatar-esque, I guess, right? And see that big world up there floating in the sky with multiple moons. And, I want to do that. It would be so amazing. I won't get to do it, but I mean, spiritually, I would love to get to go and do that.
Exactly. And I was sitting here thinking, when it comes right down to it, slightly evolving, that's kind of one of the things that humans tend to do because,
yeah, sure, we're already, yeah, you betcha.
Glass.
Yeah. I mean, I've got 2 metal screws in my knee from the reconstructive surgery from a bad fall. That's some people go farther than that. I've got, really detailed prosthetics, and that's coming to the point now where, there's the Bionic Eyes that people have now, and, we're getting there. There's the whole other discussion about whether you really want to go there or not. It's like the Jeff Goldblum thing from Jurassic Park, about whether it may be possible, but do you really want to do it or not? There's a whole legitimate discussion to have, but the possibilities are there, and there are, along with the potential bad things that can come, it's like anything. There's also a lot of good things that, if properly applied and managed, can really improve things for you. So, yeah, that might be the future we go to.
Exactly. I just see it as an evolution of biohacking, because we have people these days that are doing. There's one gentleman who's what was it? Bulletproof Coffee. The founder of that organization says he wants to try to live to be 180, and he's doing some radical stuff. To try to make that happen. So
sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's certainly possible. The question is, when a lot of people start getting to do that, how's that going to change society, right? It's going to change the structure of things. But there could be some negative implications. But from an individual, personal, oh man, if I could have a functional body and mind to be 180, think of that. You could have 3 and 4 careers in your life. You could be interested and learn. It'd be like Bicentennial Man. I love that movie. I was like, it's a deeply underrated movie. There's so much depth in that movie. But the concept you could have, think of the things you could do, and you could have multiple careers like that.
Especially if it was somebody like a Da Vinci or a Michelangelo, just constantly.
Well, anybody. Everyday person to have. I mean, how many of us? I mean, everybody would like a second chance, right? There's always something in your life where you'd like a second chance at. Well, when you live to be 180, maybe you can have that. So it's not just for the geniuses; it's for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to get into question number 6 here. We actually just briefly touched on number 7, which was I was basically asking about if you could have the magic warp bubbles.
Yeah. Right. Sure.
But okay, if there was a way to have the public more aware of what you do in various space programs, what would be the main thing you'd like the public to know that scientists are hoping to achieve with the initial crewed space flight and follow-up?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. All the, in a sense, we're kind of doing that now with the suborbital. That's what I was kind of alluding to, where I'm really happy and proud that we're able to play a little bit of that leadership role in showing people that these commercial suborbital vehicles are not just for rich tourists to go and have some adventure holiday. There's more to it than that. I mean, well, first of all, even on that front, I remember when the first flat screen TVs came out, and I was all, wide-eyed looking in the store. But then, of course, you look at the price for the little screen that was not much bigger than the computer monitor I'm looking at right now for $16,000. Well, yeah, of course, not many people could afford those back then. But the people who did buy in early brought the price down, and the economy of scale grew, and you've got now where everybody's got a huge flat screen practically. That's the nature of how these things work. Is, of course, things are a little expensive at the beginning, and only a few privileged people get to do that, but that ultimately brings it down for everybody. So what we recognize is that as that market evolves and as these vehicles continue to fly, it's going to allow, I already touched on this, it's going to allow us to go and fly more often and get the research done that we want to do. So, and on that front, what I want people to think about is that we haven't even scratched the surface, I think, of thinking about the applications for, what the implications of this coming more frequent, more affordable access to space is going to do for our society, not just for us as scientists, but for everybody. I've used the analogy before. Alan Stearns used this analogy before, but I think it's really true. We're at the stage with this availability and ease of access to space in the way that computers were back in the early 1970s or something, right? If you ask somebody in 1970, what would you do with a computer in your house? Well, first of all, they would picture this thing that was many, many filing cabinets worth of space that would have to sit in the basement. And, I don't know what they would think to do with it. I mean, you might organize your recipes with it or something, right? Keep a record of them. Your concept of what to do with it back then is nothing like what we have today. And I am next to certain that our concept of what we're going to be doing in space today are pretty limited. I think when everybody gets to start having that experience and having that transformation of what it feels like to be in 0G, which I've gotten more than one Earth orbit worth of already. It's an amazing, magical, transformative experience that it does literally change the way you think about things. It's affected my research because I I can think about what the surfaces of little asteroids are going to be like, because in a way that a lot of my colleagues can't, because I've been there. I know what it's like to work with gravel and see things kind of do this behavior that can be very counterintuitive at times. And so it changes how you think about things. And when everybody starts to get to fly to space, that broad spectrum of relating to the things you can do in space is going to change, and that's going to have payoffs and implications, and we can't even imagine what we're going to be doing in space in years to come. And I think that's what's so cool about it. If I had one message, that's what it's going to be. Is we haven't even imagined what we're going to be doing yet.
Yeah, because you watch sci-fi as an example, and you see some concepts in there, but there's other stuff that you get pieces here and pieces there. But if you have the idea of, you're going to go out for an afternoon and you're going to hop on the space elevator and go up to the station that's in near Earth orbit. From there, just hop the shuttle over to a station and just visit the L1 station. That would just be, for us, it's almost mind-boggling. But for somebody in the future, that'd be like driving to Florida.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, just something just popped in my mind as you were mentioning that. I was thinking, my brain went to thinking about art and artwork, and how is art going to change when more people have a zero-G experience. I remember one of my, Chris Butler, one of my space art colleagues once, I remember him saying, it's like, when you think about framing a picture here on Earth, we frame things, physically frame a picture for hanging on your wall. You do it either like landscape style or portrait style. There's an orientation. You're thinking in terms of, because we grew up with a G vector, right? You're going to hang something, so it's, what about zero-G art? There's no up or down. How do you display zero-G art? How do you experience it? Is it going to be more experiential than viewable? My mind went there, but that wasn't the point I was going to make. Go back to one concrete example of the kind of transformative thing that starts to happen when you have that access to a different environment. Think about, and people are already doing this, 3D printing in space. When we have people and economies that are permanently in space, the structures that you're going to build there, the tools, the things, the structures that you're going to work with are going to be different than what we work with here on the Earth. There may be filamentary structures that you need for some purpose that you couldn't even have here on the Earth, because it wouldn't even support itself in the 1G field. But yet out there in space, there's this, there may be this thing that is this amazingly useful thing that we can't even picture today because it can't physically exist here on the planet. And so that there's an example of just something that might, an imaginable example of something that might be out there. And as people are fond of saying, look, that applies to the universe, but it's all of sci-fi. The world ends up being a lot more imaginative than we are. So there's going to be all kinds of stuff we can't even contemplate yet. So yeah, I think that's the message. That's the message.
You mentioned that, and the first thing I thought of was the dry dock from the Star Trek: The Motion Picture. But imagining that as sort of like a carbon nanotube sprayed sort of setup that has robots on the inside that build your craft that don't even have to be following any aerodynamic principles whatsoever, and just something that just is built in space. And yeah, I totally get it. Yep. Okay. Geez, I think we're coming up to almost an hour.
Yeah, that was a longer half hour than we had planned, but you know what? That's fun and easy, and it could keep going. So yeah, that's the joy of it. It happens. So great. I love it.
Exactly. Yeah, because I so rarely get to talk to people who have any kind of a concept of anything outside of the little bubble, that it's so nice to talk to somebody who actually has that. So
yeah, well, there's a lot of folks out there, and there's a lot of that out there, and it's like I said, it's the privilege, the joy of working in a place like this where you get to hang around with people like that all the time, and it's the humility of realizing that there's a lot more folks out there like that than you know. So that's the fun of it.
Exactly, and depending on the circumstances, you could have somebody just like this, right? We're just having a conversation, and realize
in every field. I mean, it's like to me that was the biggest benefit of having to work hard to get a PhD. Right? There's so many. There's so much. My view, in my perspective on it, so much artificial respect for what a PhD means. To get a PhD, yeah, it's a lot of hard work to get there and everything. But I think if you do it right, when you actually get your PhD, I mean, if you've done that journey correctly, in my opinion, you arrive at the other end realizing it should be to me, it's a very humbling experience, because you realize that you now know, okay, maybe you know a lot about, but one particular little tiny little bit of the human experience. And my experience with it was, it gave me the perspective that I may know a lot about a little bit of a thing, but that tells me that there's a whole world of a whole bunch of stuff I know nothing about. And there's a lot of people out there who know a lot more about a lot of things than I do. So that's, for me, it was a humbling experience.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to the conversation, because Brian and I are going to have a chat as well.
Oh, excellent. Good. Yeah.
And
that's excellent. Yeah. He's a pretty brilliant guy too. And he can tell you a lot more about the Mars stuff than I could. That's for sure.
I'm totally going to bug him about the possibility of an artificial magnetosphere that's being generated from an L1 point.
Yep. Oh, he's your guy for that kind of far-reaching stuff, for sure.
Cool. Okay, so I think that should about wrap it up. If there's anything else that you were thinking of, you want to mention?
Oh my God, so many things. But thanks, Darren. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking with you about all this fun stuff, and could keep doing it. That's for sure.
I'm totally going to. I've waffled for 3 years, but I started with Brian Rose's team for doing the podcast, and it's just like, you know what? Why have I been waiting so long? It's been so enjoyable to do this.
That's awesome. Fun.
Cool.
Good work.
So I may bug you in the future, just to bug you.
That'd be fun. Happy to do it.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks. I'm going to close the recording off, and really appreciate the amount of time, especially because we're over an hour now, and that was half an hour more than I was expecting. So really appreciate that a lot.
You bet. Fun stuff. Glad to do it.
Okay.
Control cylinders. Deselect. Playback. Visualization. 0. Automatically programmed. Select. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, with extinction. 0.